Benjamin, this was not very, it was not so good idea, right? So this is your rapid recap of a day, and we choose Anish Giri versus Nikita Vitiugov.
Right, so the game started off quietly as Anish opened up with the move e4, Vitiugov played e5, and Anish decided to play the Italian game. So bishop c5, castles, knight f6, all pretty standard. And in yesterday's game against Tabatabai played with a more direct approach. He played very quickly d5, but Vitiugov keeps it more solid with the move d6. So how did the game continue from here?
Then Giri goes with c3, hoping to get some play in the center, more space in the center or on the queen side. We do have h6 to avoid bishop g5, also quite logical move, rook e1. All the moves looks very much standard for this opening, as now knight is ready to get on f1 and g3. Black went for a5 here, h3. Bishop went on e6, pretty much standard position here for the opening, right? And we had here b3, very interesting approach by Anish Giri, and we were speculating if Black would capture on c4. Maybe Giri's idea was to take it with the pawn to have very strong pawn structure in the center. But something else happened in the game, and out of a sudden here, Vitiugov decided to push the pawn in the center, and Benjamin, this was not very, it was not so good idea, right?
Well, it always remains to be seen. The move d5, it creates more space for Black in the center. However, after Giri took on d5 and Vitiugov recaptured, the pawn on e5 will always be a target for White. So Anish played knight e4, hitting the bishop on c5 and defending his pawn on c3 at the same time. Bishop e6 was played, and here a very interesting move, queen to d2 by Anish. She's making sure that this pawn on c3 is always protected. Vitiugov played queen to c8, hinting perhaps at a bishop takes h3 sacrifice. So Anish played knight at g3, bringing more pieces closer to the kingside and opening up the attack on the pawn on e5. And Vitiugov played f6, and here Anish struck in the center with the move d4.
Yeah, he's just using the fact that after f6, which was pretty much forced to guard e5 pawn, now this bishop on e6 will be hanging, and what's more important, the light square bishop is very strong on the diagonal, and Black will have some problems. So here Vitiugov went for queen d7 to try to bring the rook to guard this bishop on e6. We do have here bishop a3 hitting the rook on f8. Here Black decided to keep the rook on f-file, just in case if file is open after the trade of the pawns. This will be very useful together with the bishop, which gonna hit f2 pawn in many lines. But look at this move that Anish Giri just played right now, rook to e4. Tell us a little bit more about this move and the White's ideas here, Benjamin.
Yeah, rook e4, a very nice move by Anish. He wants to double up the rooks on the e-file, and if you were to go to e2, there might have been moves like knight at f4. Here, Vitiugov found a very nice move. He played pawn to a4, so he wants to create counterplay on the queen side, and Anish played b4. He didn't want his bishop on a3 to come under attack. Vitiugov played knight to f4, and this looks like a mistake because after Anish trades on e6, Vitiugov recaptured with the knight, and here d5 looks to be winning a piece because we fork both knights. But here Black still has the move knight to g5. And if you capture the knight on c6, Black will take on f3 with a check. You're forced to recapture, and then all of a sudden, your queen is now protected on d2. So Anish had other ideas. After the knight recaptured on e6, he played rook a e1. Vitiugov played knight at g5. They traded on g5. And after Anish played the move b5 and Vitiugov played knight a7, hitting the pawn on b5, Black seemed to be doing pretty fine.
Yes, as we thought that Black for now played passive move knight a7, but knight was coming here on b5, capturing the pawn, attacking the bishop, and there was no way that White could avoid that, as c4 now seems to be not the best move, as Black can take the pawn, central pawn on d4 and have very good position. But Anish Giri here had something else in his mind, and he here went for h4, and he went for a piece sacrifice, because after knight b5, he took on g5, and he gave up this bishop.
Right, but taking the bishop on a3 is extremely risky, because after knight takes a3, white will play g6. The rook is under attack, and if you move the rook, let's say to e7, white is going to go queen e2, the queen is going to come to h5, and with the queen coming to h7, black is just going to get checkmated here. So Vitiugov realized that he couldn't take the bishop, so instead of that, he recaptured on g5 with the pawn. And here Anish decides to sacrifice the bishop once again. He goes for queen takes g5, giving up a full piece. Vitiugov takes the bishop, and here Anish goes rook to h4. And here it felt like white's attack is just too strong to defend against.
It is too strong, as also very simple just to bring the queen on h5, try to threaten and checkmate, and to bring more pieces on the in the game, knight e4, or before knight e4, rook takes d5. So here we saw that the only move to keep it go was rook to e8, also suggested by the engine in the first line. However, next move after queen h5 and rook f6, here knight e4, the rook was hanging. It seems like black just lost here some of the defense ideas and went for the white's traps. For instance, here, Benjamin, if black plays rook h6, something bad gonna happen to you, black, here.
Indeed, rook h6 looks like a nice defensive move for black, but unfortunately, there is a queen takes h6, and as soon as black recaptures that g-pawn is not defending the f6 square, so white jumps in, knight f6 check, and collects the queen on d7, and in the resulting position, white will be up in exchange and a couple pawns. So Vitiugov realized that he couldn't do that, so instead of that, he played rook to f5. Anish played knight g5, bringing another piece closer to the attack. Vitiugov was forced to give up his rook for the knight. And after queen takes g5, it felt like, the game was still pretty complicated.
Absolutely, but the bad thing for Vitiugov here is not only open king, but also the knight is just too far away. So we thought to bring the knight on c4 would be just right timing, and then to bring this knight all the way to the king side to guard the weak king. We also pointed out at the commentary that the bishop on b6 is quite blocked and is not taking any part for now into the game. So for this reason here, Vitiugov played c5. He wanted to open up a bit position for the bishop and this diagonal, but it seems to be the wrong decision by black.
Indeed, because after c5, white gets too much time. Anish played the move queen to g6, bring the king just a little bit closer to the black king, and also attacking that bishop on b6. So Vitiugov played the move bishop to d8, hitting the rook on h4, but now Anish found a very nice finishing touch. He played the move rook to h7. Now white is trying to take on g7 in some variations, deflecting the queen on d7, because if black recaptures, he can take the rook on e8. But more importantly, white also wants to go with the queen to h5, and then threaten to go rook h8 while the queen is still defending that f7 square. Vitiugov saw no defense here, and so he resigned the game.
He had to resign after rook h7, as there's no any single way to avoid white's very difficult threat, starting with rook g7 or queen h5, even checkmate. So here we have another victory for Anish Giri. This is second game for the Dutch Grandmaster. He's leading the his group at the FIDE Grand Prix 2022, and this was your rapid recap of the day.
Yeah, so it's looking pretty good in Group A for Dimitri Andreikin and Sam Shankland. They're both leading with 1.5 points out of 2 games. In Group B, Anish, once again, he's crushing it with 2 points out of 2 games. He's leading by a point. Vitiugov is behind him. And what are the standings in Group C?
In Group C, Vidit Gujarati has very good tournament. He has a really good comeback after first leg of the Grand Prix, and he's now leading the group with 2 points, and he's 1 point ahead of Richard Rapport, and we do have Fidostov Shirov having half points each. And in Group D, we still don't know what's happening. So they're going to fight from round 3 for the leader's position. So far, we don't have any single leader in this group.